Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today we have 3 new NARS eyeshadow quads to review. I am so excited for this. So they did release 2 new quads that are brand new to their core line, and then they did release the With Love collection. So the With Love collection also came out with a blush, and I think they're a light reflecting powder and a red compact. I didn't pick up any of those products, but I thought, let's review all of these quads. I don't know if the With Love collection is available everywhere, but I know it is on the NARS Canada website, which is where I ordered these from. So one thing that I found interesting right away is that most of the NARS quads and palettes are made in Canada and have a 12-month shelf life. The exception is the Summer Unrated palette, which was actually made in Italy. So I noticed that these new quads, these 2 right here, are also made in Canada and have a 12-month shelf life. But I noticed that the With Love quad, the Osaka quad, this one is actually made in Italy and has an 18-month shelf life. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But let's open these up. Let's look at some swatches. I'll create a look with each palette, and then I will show you some comparisons toward the end. So first up, we have the RONG quad, and this is just a beautiful all matte leaning cool color story. So this is definitely leaning a little bit cooler. I'm already thinking I want to compare it to the new Makeup by Mario palette. It is a little bit darker than I expected, just with these 2 dark shades right here, but I am excited to play with it. The look is going to be very simple, but I am excited to play with it. I should mention these do also have that soft touch matte feel on all 3 of them, which I love. Next, we have the St. Paul de VENCE quad, and this one is a little bit more fun. This one leans into those peach tones and has this really pretty shimmer on the top, and you can see from the swatches that this one definitely leans into those peachy tones a little bit more, which we know I love. I'm kind of excited to see this one toward the end compared to the Mini Biba palette from Natasha Denona, because that is my all-time favorite palette. I think the shimmer will compare in some ways, but they are very different formulas. I would say the NARS definitely feels much thinner, but I am excited to compare those toward the end. And finally, we have the Osaka quad, and this is from the With Love collection. Now this one is interesting. When I was swatching these out, I realized that the formulas in here are different. They are a baked chalet, whereas the other 2 quads are pressed powders. These 3 all seem to be a satin, and this one is more of a shimmer, but when I was swatching this out, I was noticing how light this really is. So I'm kind of curious to get this one on the eyes and see what I think. So far, I'm expecting to like St. Paul de VENCE the most, but let me zoom you in, and then we will get to putting these on the eyes, and then we will jump into some comparisons. So we're gonna start with the RONG quad, so the fully matte, and these shades really don't have any names. It's really just RONG 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I am gonna start with this one right here. I do really love the NARS matte formula. I just find them so silky and easy to work with and easy to blend. This shade in particular is actually reminding me of a shade in the Sigma New Mod palette that I've kind of been obsessed with. It's been my go-to crease shade for the last little while, and I usually throw that one in the crease and then top it with Beige Mitza from Dior. And I've really been loving that. I can see myself pairing this quad with that shadow in particular. This is really nice. I do just have some foundation and powder down on my lids. I wasn't really worried about a primer, given that I'm just going to take this off right away, and these are blending perfectly fine. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit of this one now. I'm popping this in the outer corner. I do think that these mattes are definitely very pigmented, because I am dabbing off my brush a little bit and I'm still getting a really nice color payoff. These 2 do seem to be blending into each other really well and really easily. And that is something that always gets me with the NARS mattes. I just find they are so silky, and the way they blend into one another, it takes so much of the work out of blending. I just absolutely love it. And that is why I continue to buy the NARS palettes and quads, even though I have the same complaint as everybody else, that they tend to come out with the same things over and over again, but their formulas are so good. I would probably normally just leave it like this and then maybe use that really deep brown as a liner, But I think because I'm just going to be taking it off and I want to see how it performs, I am going to take that super dark brown, this one in the outer corner, just a little bit. And again, this formula is not disappointing. I was a little worried about doing that, but it did me no harm. I am impressed. And just blending those edges a little bit. I do think that looks quite nice. I am going to go in with a Sonia G small worker brush. This has been my favorite to apply mattes all over the lid. And just grab that very first creamy kind of shade right there. And just pop this one all over the lid. I like that it's not a super stark white. It's got a creaminess to it, but it's still kind of brown. So it does work well with the other shades. And it doesn't feel like I've got to spend a lot of time sort of blending them all into one another. Because normally I would put a shade all over my lid and then I would feel like I need to spend a lot more time blending it into that outer corner. And I really don't feel like I need to. So that is what this came out looking like with the RONG quad. I will pop off camera, pop on some mascara, and then come back to get into the next quad. So here is the first look with the RONG quad. Is it basic? Yes. But do I really like it? Also yes. It was incredibly easy to do, incredibly easy to accomplish. The formula definitely stands up to their other palettes and quads, so I'm very, very pleased. I will compare it to the Mario palette at the end of the video. So let's get into the St. Paul de Vence quad. So I'm going to start with this peach shade right here. I think this is a really pretty peach. And this one is going to go in the crease. I'm debating on putting it all over the lid, actually. That is such a pretty peach shade. Okay, I think I might actually take that peach on my cleaned off Sonia G brush and put it all over the lid because I think that's really, really pretty. And I think that that will create a nice base for that shimmer. That shimmer does seem to be, when I swatched it out, it did look a little bit thin, so I would much rather have something underneath. And then just blending the edges. So I'm just going to take this shade right here in the inner corner. I think that'll be a pretty little brightening shade. That does look quite nice actually. I might actually add just a little bit over here just to give a little bit of life. But again, very subtle, but it is just a nice little touch. I am going to grab that dark brown, tap off my brush a little bit, and pop this one on my outer corner, just dabbing really, really lightly. That's actually blending with the peach better than I expected. Okay, I'm just gonna grab my blending brush again just to go around those edges, but I'm kind of happy with how that came out. You could definitely make that brown more intense, but I like the way that it worked into that peach. Okay, that's really pretty. I think with a finger, I'm going to apply that shimmer all over the lid just to see what happens. It does feel a little bit dry, but very sparkly. Ooh, that's beautiful. Okay. That's super pretty. That's definitely giving like an ethereal kind of a look. Definitely a much thinner formula, but giving that more ethereal wet effect kind of look. That is the formula I would compare this particular shimmer to, is the Natasha Denona sparkling wet effect, because that is what this shade does. I think that's lovely. That is really soft, but I like it. And again, just giving that wet kind of ethereal effect. That wet effect I just think is so beautiful. So let me pop off camera. I will pop on some mascara, come back and show you the final look, and then I will take off my eyeshadow and get into the third quad. So as I'm editing, I realized that I did pop off camera, pop on some mascara, and then I forgot to come back and show you the finished look before taking off my eyeshadow. So my apologies for that. So I did manage to take off my eyeshadow and preserve the mascara, which I love when that happens. And let's get into the Osaka quad from the With Love collection. So I am going to start with this shade right here. And I'm just going to, I think, put this one all over the lid It is very, very light, so I'm not really sure if it's going to do much, but maybe it's kind of like a nice prep step. I had seen this quad leaked quite a few months ago, honestly, and at first I thought I am not going to pick that up because it does look very, very light, but then it kind of launched at the same time as these other two, so I just figured it was perfect. Okay, so that really didn't do much aside from creating a nice base shade for the look. So I think I'm going to dip into this shade right here, and I'm gonna buff this one into the crease just a little bit higher. Sometimes with these baked jelly formulas, natural hair brushes will pick up a little bit more. I'm not 100% sure on the reason for that, but that can be the case with these baked jelly formulas. That's not to say you cannot get it done with a synthetic. You definitely can. It's just that you might get a little bit more color payoff with natural hair. That's creating a nice little base. It's definitely very light though. Okay, I'm gonna grab that denser brush that I've been using for the dark shadows. This is the Sigma and Brianna Fox 2 brush. This is like my favorite for the outer corner. Something about it, it just works so well. It's just dense enough to pack it in, and it's small enough that it doesn't cover too much surface area. It looks filthy, but I have cleaned it off on my Sigma switch. And I'm just dipping into that deepest shade right down here. My main blending brush that I use for all of my looks is the BK Beauty 202. That's pretty. Again, very, very light. I do not think this is a palette that is going to give you a lot of depth. If that is what you're looking for, you can see I'm kind of fighting for it just on that outer corner a little bit. I'm still getting a nice color payoff. I'm just not getting a ton of depth the way that I might with a powder. I do have a palette in mind to compare this to, so I am excited to see them side by side and maybe give you a recommendation one way or the other. I do love a good quad though, I'll tell you that. I do love a good quad. They're just so easy, so simple to create looks with. You're not there all day thinking about where you might want to go next, but I still love a good palette. I do want to try grabbing a slightly different brush. I'm just grabbing a rougher 27. I just want to see if it picks up any more. This one is a little bit fluffier than I would like for this purpose, but I just want to see if it picks up a little bit more. Oh, maybe. I didn't think it was, but I do think that I got a little bit more from that. Not a ton, but it definitely gave me a little bit more. I'm going to go in with a finger and grab this shimmer right here. And this is going to be my lid shade. This looks like it's almost got like a pinky peach shift. It's very NARS Orgasm reminiscent. I actually have two palettes in mind to compare to this one. I don't know if I like how light it is, to be honest. I feel like I should have had a shade underneath that to give me a little bit more impact. I did go all over the lid with this shade right here, but I feel like maybe it should have been something else. Just out of curiosity's sake, let me go in all over the lid with this shade right here on the other side. I want to see if that makes a difference. I'm not going anywhere. It doesn't matter if my eyeshadow doesn't match. That's not even giving me the most, but let's see what it looks like on this side with that shade down as the base. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that does give us a little bit more life to the lid when you put that one pink shade down first. Okay, I think I will pick up a little bit of this first shade right here, just for that inner corner brightening moment. Okay, it does okay for that as well. So this is the final look with the Osaka palette, and I gotta say, it's not my favorite. I fully expected to like it a little bit more, but let's take a look at some comparisons. All right, so let's get into these comparisons. So I do want to start with the Osaka quad, because this is the one that was a little bit different. This is the one that was made in Italy, has an 18-month shelf life, has a baked gelée formula, and has a bit different packaging. I thought I would like this much more than I do, but I did find some similarities in my collection. The first palette that came to mind immediately just based on this sort of mauve-y but nude kind of color story, was actually the Mini Starlet from Natasha Denona. So just these mauve tones here and then the little pops of pinky peach, I just thought were very, very similar. Popping them up side by side, I do stand by that. I do think they are pretty similar. Mini Starlet is also another palette that I really don't think you can get a lot of depth from. I mean, the deepest shade in here really doesn't give us a lot of depth. So that was another reason that I was really compelled to compare these two. I think at the end of the day though, the Mini Starlet does pull a little bit more warm and I do like it better overall. Shade for shade, they're not identical, but they are similar. Then I wanted to pull the Charlotte Tilbury Flawless Eye Filter in Star Aura because this is another one that is like a baked formula, which again isn't my favorite, but I do like this quad. This is also not going to give you a ton of depth. This is going to give you a much lighter look to the eyes. This is really best for one and done looks if that's what you're looking for. Swatching them side by side, the shades really don't have a lot of similarities. I do think the quality of the Charlotte Tilbury is better, and that really surprises me because I find that eyeshadows made in Italy are just so incredibly good. This one to me is just okay. I have NARS palettes I like so much more like the other ones that I played with today. I unfortunately don't love this quad. I really thought it was going to be my favorite, but I really don't love it that much. Next, let's talk about the St. Paul de Vence palette. So with this quad, my mind immediately went to my beloved Mini Biba because we have these peach tones, we have a brown pop over here, and then we have this really beautiful shimmer. But after I applied this one to the eyes, it wasn't really as similar as I thought. When I put Mini Biba on my eyes, I just feel like I am transformed into the very best version of myself. That is dramatic, but that is how I feel with the Mini Biba. This one is pretty. It is really pretty, but it didn't have that magic effect on me. And the shimmer in here much more reminds me of the Natasha Denona wet effect rather than this gorgeous, intense, impactful shimmer that we got over here. The peaches were similar enough, but again, Natasha's formula was definitely more creamy, more pigmented, and packed more of a punch. I still think this is a beautiful palette, a beautiful option, but it wasn't as similar to Mini Biba as I thought. However, I did find an almost perfect dupe in my collection. It's not a quad, it is a full palette, but the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude. Holding them side by side, you can kind of see where I was going with that, particularly with the wet effect formulas. The shade Sheen is the one I used to put side by side with the shimmer in the St. Paul quad. And I think you can tell from the swatches, I created a very, very similar look. I wasn't able to perfectly replicate the peach in here, but I think I got close enough that if you have the I Need a Nude, you do not need the St. Paul palette. I will say that the sparkling wet effect in the Natasha Denona has a lot more oomph to it than the shimmer in here. This reminded me of that formula just in that it's quite thin. It just gives you that ethereal wet effect to the eyes. However, the Natasha Denona has much more of a base to it, whereas this shade really doesn't. It's kind of a very sheer base and just more sparkle than anything. So I thought that was interesting, but if you have the I Need a Nude, you absolutely don't need the St. Paul quad. Unless you want it, but you don't need it. I then went into the KOH matte quad because I really like this one. And of course, the very first palette that I compared this to was the new Makeup by Mario Master Mattes, the neutrals, and that was absolutely the closest match. I think I almost perfectly duped this quad with that one. I do think that if you're in Canada, pricing wise between these NARS quads and the Makeup by Mario, the Mario is a far better deal, and I would recommend you go with that one. But I do think the NARS is still very, very pretty. I think it's handy that it just has the 4 shades and you can be done. I think that's a really nice effect. I do still love the NARS matte formula so, so much. The Mario formula does not swatch well at all, but applied to the eyes, it's absolutely beautiful. And we know I absolutely love a good NARS matte shadow. So formula-wise, I love them both dearly. But I do think the Mario is a much better value, particularly if you're in Canada. I think these quads were $66 each. So I do recommend the Mario. So I did pretty much find an exact dupe in there. I did also compare to the Patrick Ta Major Dimension Volume 3, the all matte palette that he has, and I was also able to get some similarities there. Not as close as the Mario, but I would say close enough that if you put them on the eyes, you're really not going to notice a difference. And finally, I was really determined to find a more affordable option, so I went to the ColourPop Gone Matte palette, and I was able to find 4 quite similar shadows in there as well. I definitely don't think the ColourPop formula is as good as the NARS. Definitely not. And NARS really put a lot more emphasis and effort into the tone of shadows, which I don't think the ColourPop did, but it is an affordable palette. I kind of expect that. I think the RONG palette, the matte, is probably the most unnecessary, just given how many all matte palettes are out there at the moment. But I do still think it's very pretty. It's incredibly easy to work with. It's beautiful. If you are looking for a very small quad that you can just take with you, maybe you're traveling and you don't want to lug around all these heavier palettes, this could be a great option. You're not going to be disappointed in the quality or the formula. I think it's fantastic. It's just, most of us have these already, whether it's in an all matte palette or another palette, but you probably have these shades. However, I do think it is an excellent palette if you are wanting a quad like this. The St. Paul palette is probably my favorite. I think it's really, really pretty. I do love how that shimmer looks very wet on the eyes. I love the peach. I always love a good peach on my eyes. And I love how the brown isn't too intense and actually works very well with that peachy shade. I think that's really pretty. And I do love how that shimmer makes the lids just look very wet and beautiful. So I think this palette is probably my favorite, but again, if you have the I Need a Nude from Natasha Denona, please skip this. You don't need it. And finally, the Osaka palette from the With Love collection. This is the one I wanted to love the most and expected to love the most, and quite honestly, I just don't. The eye look I have on right now is, in my opinion, just okay. I don't love it. Again, I found some similarities with the Mini Starlet from Natasha, and I like that palette quite a bit better. I just find the shimmer to be quite a bit drier, and it really is hard to get a lot of pigment. So I think if you have a deeper skin tone, you're not going to get much out of this. My favorite is the St. Paul, but again, I found an almost perfect dupe. The matte is beautiful if you're looking for a very compact matte palette. This could be great. I don't think any of these are 100% necessary. I did compare them to some of the other NARS palettes in my collection, and I'm happy to see NARS come out with something a little bit different. Heavy emphasis on the a little bit different. Everyone says all the time that NARS does not come out with new things. I couldn't agree with you more. They really don't, but their quality is fabulous. These aren't the most new, most innovative, or innovative at all color stories, but they are still quite pretty. I would just skip the With Love palette. These 2 new ones that are new to their core line, I think are beautiful. So if you collect these, you won't be disappointed with them. I like that they're very different, and I like what each one has to offer. But that is it for me today. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Were you thinking of purchasing these? Have you already? Did I save you from purchasing anything? Let me know, because I love to hear that too. That makes me just as happy. If you buy something on my recommendation and absolutely love it, my heart is so full and happy. But if I talk you out of buying something and save you some money, that also makes me super, super happy, because I fully understand the value in that. So let me know all of your thoughts down below. I love hearing from you guys so, so much. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!